Most people are walking around with a supercomputer in their head and no idea how to use the control panel. There's a reason this technique was quietly removed from many therapy rooms. It works too fast, too effectively, and it challenges the entire model of slow change. The key to rewiring your brain isn't hidden in years of talk, it's in what you do in the next 10 seconds with your breath, your focus, and your nervous system. This isn't motivation. This is biology leveraged with precision. You've been taught to cope with your emotions. What if instead you learn to command them? Every day, people search for answers to anxiety, to depression, to lack of motivation. They want to feel better, do more, be more. And often, they're told the process has to be long, complex, or buried under years of therapy. But what if there was a tool simple, fast, and backed by solid neuroscience that could radically shift how you feel in minutes? There is one, and it was used for decades quietly, often hidden in plain sight. But when people started getting real, measurable results, when emotions started clearing faster than expected, many practitioners started pulling back. Why? Because it worked too well. It disrupted the model. It made healing something that felt achievable. Here's how it works. Your brain has circuits, neural pathways that are essentially like muscle memory for your emotions. When you think a certain way or feel a certain response over and over, those circuits get stronger, but, and this is critical, the brain is not static, it's plastic, it can change. The trick is knowing how to deliberately engage that plasticity. This band, brain hack, taps into something called top. Down control where your prefrontal cortex tells your limbic system I'm in charge now. You essentially rewire how you feel by shifting how you perceive . And it's not through journaling or endless self-analysis. It's through visualization breathwork and behavioral tagging in a very specific order. Here's the protocol. First, state shift through breath Use a double inhale through the nose followed by a long exhale through the mouth. Do that 2 or 3 times. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, lowering your internal alarm bells. Second, immediately afterward, visualize the outcome you fear not avoid it. Picture it clearly, but here's the hack. Instead of reacting, bring up an image of yourself moving through it, not succeeding wildly, just doing it The brain doesn't distinguish well between imagined and real experiences, so this tags that feared moment as survivable. Repeat it, make it boring, to threaten it. Then, and this is where most protocols stop short, you do one small behavior in the direction of that fear, not massive action, just movement, because action completes the loop. It sends a signal from your body to your brain, we're not trapped anymore. That's the point. You're not trying to erase fear. You're retraining your brain to relate to it differently. That's why it worked so well. That's why it became quietly discouraged, because it didn't fit the model of needing months to feel functional again. This tool didn't promise to solve all your problems, but it did something even more powerful. It gave control back to the person using it. When you feel stuck, remember this: your brain isn't a prison, it's a tool, and with the right inputs, you can shift how it works. The human brain is not a fixed system. For a long time, people believed that after a certain age, the brain's structure and function became rigid, unchangeable, and essentially set in stone. That belief is not only outdated, it's inaccurate. The modern field of neuroscience has made it abundantly clear. The brain is plastic. This means it has the ability to rewire itself based on experiences, behaviors, thoughts, and even intentional mental practice. What's revolutionary, and perhaps underappreciated, is how rapidly this rewiring can occur when the right inputs are applied in the right sequence. Neuroplasticity isn't just a vague concept. It's the foundation of how we learn, how we adapt, and how we recover from trauma or setbacks. And here's where it gets even more powerful. Plasticity doesn't always require long therapy sessions, years of deep introspection, or a life-altering event. Under the right conditions, the brain can change quickly, sometimes within minutes. But it's not magic. It's biology, it's chemistry, it's electricity, and all of it is responsive to specific patterns of action and attention. What unlocks this rapid plasticity? It's not just about thinking positively or trying harder. The brain doesn't change because you want it to. It changes because you provide it with the inputs that create the neurochemical environment necessary for change. These inputs can include things like focused attention, elevated emotional states, novelty, and repetition. But when those ingredients are combined in specific ways, the brain starts firing in new patterns, and those patterns, if reinforced, become new neural pathways. Let's talk about how quickly this can happen. For example, when someone engages in deep breathing, particularly patterns like the physiological sigh, double inhale, followed by a slow exhale, the balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems shifts. This isn't just about feeling calm, it changes the neurochemical state of the brain. Cortisol drops, adrenaline balances, and dopamine becomes more available. In that state, the brain is more receptive to new information. That's the opening. Now, layer in visualization or focused internal rehearsal. When you vividly imagine an event, especially one that evokes emotion, your brain lights up as if you are actually experiencing it. That's because many of the same neural circuits are involved in both real and imagined experiences. So when someone imagines doing something they fear or something they aspire to do, and does it in a calm and deliberate state, the brain begins to tag that imagined event as familiar and less threatening. That's the second piece of the rewiring, but the most powerful accelerant comes next: behavior. Even a small action taken immediately after visualization creates a kind of reinforcement loop. It closes the circuit. You've shifted your physiology through breath, primed your brain through visualization, and then you take a small, concrete action, something physical, observable, and real. The brain then releases neurochemicals associated with success, such as dopamine, and those neurochemicals serve as a signal to strengthen the new neural pathway. This sequence, state shift, visualization, action, is not random. It follows the rules of how the brain learns. State comes first because a stressed or distracted brain cannot encode new patterns effectively. Visualization comes next because it allows the mind to preview and pre-experience what the body will soon do. Action comes last because it makes the imagined real and the real meaningful. That's what causes durable change. What's surprising to many people is just how immediate the effects can be. It's not that someone becomes a completely different person overnight, but the shift in perception, the reduction in fear, the sudden burst of clarity or motivation, those are real, tangible results. And they occur not because the brain is broken and now fixed, but because the brain is dynamic and has been directed intentionally. You're not forcing change, you're enabling it by speaking the brain's own language. None of this is speculation. It's backed by studies in neuroplasticity, fear extinction, cognitive behavioral science, and somatic psychology. Techniques like EMDR, certain forms of exposure therapy, and behavioral activation all hinge on these principles: changing the state, redirecting attention, and reinforcing through action. The common thread is not the specific technique, but the sequence and precision of application. The brain is a prediction machine. It's constantly anticipating what's coming next based on past experiences. But when you interrupt that loop, when you provide a new input in a new context, you disrupt the prediction. And with enough repetition, the new pattern replaces the old one. That's how you unlearn fear, reframe pain, build confidence, or shift identity, not over decades, but in strategically applied moments of focused change. This is why the idea that the brain can only change slowly or with great difficulty is not just wrong, it's limiting. It robs people of agency. The reality is, we all have access to the tools of rapid rewiring. The challenge isn't whether the brain can change, it's whether we're willing to use the tools that change it. The human brain is a complex network of systems that constantly interact with one another to produce thoughts, emotions, decisions, and behaviors. Among these systems, the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system play especially critical roles in how we respond to the world around us. The limbic system, which includes structures like the amygdala and hippocampus, is responsible for emotional processing, memory, and survival instincts. It's ancient, fast, and powerful, reacting to threats or rewards long before we consciously realize what's happening. On the other hand, the prefrontal cortex, located in the front part of the brain, is what allows for rational thought, planning, reflection, and self-control. It is uniquely human and slower to activate, but it's also the seat of our decision-making power and higher cognition. Top-down control refers to the process by which the prefrontal cortex exerts influence over the more reactive, emotionally driven parts of the brain, especially the limbic system. It's what allows you to feel afraid and still act. It's what lets you pause before reacting. It's the neurological foundation of willpower, composure, and intentional behavior. Without this top-down influence, our brains would be in a constant state of emotional reactivity, responding to every challenge or discomfort with primal instincts instead of thoughtful responses. The beauty of top-down control is that it's trainable. It isn't something you're either born with or not. You can learn to strengthen this process, much like a muscle, through specific practices that increase awareness, regulate emotion, and enhance cognitive control. When top-down control is strong, the brain shifts from being reaction-driven to intention-driven. Instead of being hijacked by anxiety, stress, or fear, the brain can observe those states, contextualize them, and choose how to respond. One of the most important aspects of this mechanism is how quickly it can influence our internal state. For instance, when we pause and take conscious control of our breathing, we begin to change how the body feels. That change sends signals back up to the brains, specifically the prefrontal cortex, that everything is under control. That signal allows the brain to regain composure and override the amygdala's alarm signals. It may seem simple, but it is one of the clearest demonstrations of top-down control in action, conscious breath controlling unconscious emotion. Another powerful example is mental reframing. When you consciously reframe a challenge, say, viewing a stressful situation as an opportunity rather than a threat, you're engaging the prefrontal cortex to reinterpret the limbic system's raw emotional output. This reinterpretation has a biological consequence. Cortisol levels drop, heart rate stabilizes, and dopamine increases slightly, signaling the brain to stay engaged rather than escape. Over time, this practice changes how your brain defaults to interpreting similar events. It rewires the emotional response to be less reactive and more resilient. What's fascinating is that the prefrontal cortex also regulates attention and focus. Where you place your attention determines what parts of your brain become activated. So, when you focus on solutions instead of problems or on gratitude instead of fear, you're not just thinking differently, you're activating different neural networks that suppress fear pathways and amplify motivation circuits. That's not just psychology, that's neurobiology. Your brain literally shifts its operational state based on where you direct your attention, and it's the prefrontal cortex that makes this decision. Stress, anxiety, and trauma can impair top-down control by overwhelming the prefrontal cortex with too many emotional signals from the limbic system. But this relationship works both ways. Strengthening the prefrontal cortex through deliberate practices, like mindfulness, breath regulation, cognitive reframing, and visualization, can calm the limbic system and restore balance. It's like installing a thermostat in a room that's been overheating for years. You don't erase the heat, but you learn to regulate it. Top-down control also plays a critical role in breaking habits. Habits are often formed in the limbic system through repetition and reward. They operate below conscious awareness. But when you become aware of the habit loop and insert a moment of choice, you're allowing the prefrontal cortex to step in and disrupt the automatic response. That brief pause, the moment you notice and choose, creates a window for change. Over time, consistently choosing a different response rewires the neural loop and gives control back to conscious thought. This capacity is also why visualization can be such a powerful tool. When you mentally rehearse a behavior or response, especially in a calm state, the prefrontal cortex lays down a kind of blueprint. Then, when you enter a similar real-life situation, your brain has a pre-made pattern to follow, reducing panic and increasing confidence. You're not just imagining success, you're priming the circuits that make it possible. Top-down control is ultimately about reclaiming agency. It's the neurological mechanism that lets you choose how you show up, even when the environment is chaotic or stressful. It's how the human brain can override fear with courage, anger with patience, and uncertainty with action. You don't eliminate emotional responses, but you learn to relate to them differently, to respond rather than react. That's not just a skill, it's a form of self-mastery rooted in biology, available to anyone willing to train it. Breath is not just about oxygen, it's a tool, a lever into the autonomic nervous system, the system responsible for regulating your heart rate, digestion, stress response, and more. Most people go through their day breathing automatically, without much thought. But when breath becomes deliberate, it becomes a powerful instrument for shifting your internal state. In fact, conscious breathwork is one of the fastest, most effective ways to change how you feel, mentally and physically, in real time. It's also the most accessible tool we have. You don't need equipment, medication, or hours of training. You just need to know how to use it properly. The autonomic nervous system is divided into two branches: the sympathetic nervous system, responsible for alertness, arousal, and stress, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which governs relaxation, digestion, and recovery. Most of the time, we operate in a balance between these two. But stress, anxiety, or even habitual tension can shift us into a sympathetic, dominant state. This means higher heart rate, shallow breathing, scattered thoughts, and emotional reactivity. The problem is that this state isn't just unpleasant, it blocks cognitive flexibility and decision-making. You can't think clearly when your nervous system is in survival mode. This is where breath becomes a key. Specific breathing patterns can nudge the nervous system back toward parasympathetic dominance, calming the body and opening up access to the prefrontal cortex, the seat of logical reasoning and willpower. One of the most powerful and well-researched techniques is called the physiological sigh. This involves taking 2 quick inhales through the nose, followed by a slow, extended exhale through the mouth. It can be done in about 10-15 seconds. What's fascinating is that this breath pattern occurs naturally during moments of emotional relief, such as crying or releasing tension. It's the body's built-in mechanism for downregulating stress. When you use the physiological sigh intentionally, You're mimicking that same internal process, sending a direct signal to your brain and body that it's safe to relax. This pattern increases carbon dioxide offloading, balances oxygen levels, and reduces activity in stress-related brain regions. Just 1 or 2 rounds can significantly decrease anxiety and reset focus. It's not a meditation. It's not abstract. It's biology applied with precision. But breath doesn't just regulate stress. It also affects focus and energy. For example, faster, more rhythmic breathing, especially through the nose, can increase alertness by stimulating the sympathetic branch in a controlled way. This is useful in moments when you need to activate quickly without relying on stimulants. Box breathing, another technique popularized by high-performance communities, involves inhaling for 4 seconds, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, and holding again. This pattern stabilizes both physiological and mental fluctuations. It creates coherence between breath, heart rate, and brain waves, promoting calm focus. What breath control really offers is state control. It's a bridge between body and brain. When you change how you breathe, you change the signals your body sends to the brain. And the brain responds by altering your internal chemistry, lowering or increasing levels of neurotransmitters like norepinephrine and dopamine, changing heart rate variability, and modifying which brain circuits dominate your awareness. This capacity is especially important when dealing with high-pressure situations, emotional overwhelm, or the need to shift gears rapidly, from work to rest, from stress to creativity. Many people attempt to change their thoughts when overwhelmed, but the brain resists cognitive shifts in a dysregulated state. Breath is the shortcut. It doesn't require belief, analysis, or effortful mental reframing. It simply alters the foundation on which all thoughts and feelings rest. In moments of fear or self-doubt, most people try to think their way out. They try to reason with their anxiety, but those thoughts are happening inside a body that's sending panic signals to the brain. It's like trying to steer a car while the engine is overheating. You have to cool the engine first. That's what breath does. It lowers the physiological intensity so that your cognitive systems can come back online. Even more interestingly, regular breathwork practice appears to create structural changes in the brain over time. Studies have shown increased connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and limbic system in individuals who engage in daily controlled breathing exercises. This means your ability to regulate emotions improves not just temporarily, but permanently. Your brain learns to self-soothe, self-correct, and respond with greater resilience to stress. Breath also holds a unique role because it's both automatic and controllable. That makes it the only function in the autonomic nervous system we can deliberately override at any moment. You can't directly control your heartbeat or digestion on command, but you can always control your breath. And when you do, those other systems follow. That gives you leverage, that gives you access, that gives you a built-in switchboard for changing your entire state of being. The human brain is designed to predict, to assess threats, and to respond in ways that maximize survival. One of its most powerful systems for doing this is the limbic system, particularly the amygdala, which plays a central role in detecting danger and triggering fear responses. When you experience fear, whether from a real threat or a perceived one, the brain creates a memory of that event and tags it with emotional intensity. That's why fearful or traumatic memories often feel so vivid and hard to shake. They are designed to stick. However, the same brain that learns fear can also unlearn it. And one of the most effective ways to do this is through deliberate visualization while in a calm, controlled state. The key is context. When your brain associates an image, idea, or situation with fear, it isn't just about what happened. It's about the emotional and physiological state you were in when it happened. If the heart was racing, the breath was shallow, and your thoughts were spiraling, the brain interprets that moment as dangerous. But when you visualize that same situation, while in a calm state, you begin to overwrite the original emotional imprint. The brain starts to say, maybe this isn't dangerous after all. This process is called deconditioning, and it's grounded in both neuroscience and clinical psychology. To make this effective, the visualization must be done asterisk after asterisk. You've already shifted your physiological state. If you try to imagine a fearful situation while still feeling stressed, you're only reinforcing the association. But if you calm the nervous system first using breathwork or another grounding tool, you can visualize the event from a new baseline. This changes how the brain encodes that memory. It's not about lying to yourself. It's about retraining the brain to respond differently to the same stimulus. This process engages a mechanism known as memory reconsolidation. Every time you recall a memory, that memory becomes briefly malleable. It can be updated with new emotional data before it gets stored again. So when you bring up a feared scenario in your mind and pair it with calm breathing, steady posture, and grounded awareness, you are essentially rewriting the emotional charge attached to that memory. Over time, the fear decreases not because you've avoided the memory, but because you've reprocessed it with new context. It's important to understand that the brain doesn't always distinguish clearly between what's real and what's vividly imagined. Functional MRI studies show that visualizing a situation lights up many of the same brain regions as actually experiencing it. This is what makes visualization such a powerful tool. It creates real change at the neural level. If you consistently visualize yourself approaching a feared situation calmly, your brain begins to encode that as a valid response pattern. It becomes part of your cognitive repertoire. What makes this particularly effective is combining visualization with exposure to a very mild version of the real stimulus. For example, if someone has social anxiety, they might first calm their nervous system with breathwork, then visualize themselves speaking in front of a group while maintaining that calm state. The next step might be making brief eye contact with someone in public or asking a stranger a simple question. These small, real-world exposures serve as proof to the brain that the imagined calm response is possible. Each time it works, dopamine is released, reinforcing the new behavior and diminishing the fear circuit. There's a principle at play here. Neurons that fire together wire together. When you activate the visualization of a feared outcome while also activating a calm physiological state, you are wiring those two states together. You are teaching your brain that fear no longer has to dominate that experience. And over time, the old connection between fear and that scenario begins to weaken through a process known as synaptic pruning. The less a neural pathway is used, the more it fades. Visualization also works on the positive end of the spectrum. When you vividly imagine a successful or empowering version of a difficult scenario and pair it with calm, alert attention, you pre-wire your brain to expect success. That expectation shifts how you approach the situation in real life. You become more open, more present, more capable of accessing creativity and resourcefulness. The brain essentially rehearses confidence before you ever act. Many people underestimate the power of visualization because it seems passive. But in the right state, with the right level of emotional engagement, it is one of the most active tools you can use. You're not daydreaming, you're doing targeted, deliberate neural rewiring. You are weakening one circuit and strengthening another. You are preparing your nervous system to succeed where it once faltered. This doesn't mean you eliminate fear entirely. It means you train your brain to view that fear through a different lens, to integrate it rather than be controlled by it. And that shift changes everything: your behavior, your beliefs, your sense of identity, and ultimately, your outcomes. Dopamine is often misunderstood as simply the molecule of pleasure. But in reality, dopamine is far more foundational. It's the molecule of motivation, drive, focus, and future-oriented behavior. When dopamine is released in the brain, it creates a sense of anticipation, a desire to pursue, to act, to move forward toward a goal. It is the neurochemical that says, that is worth doing. Without it, there is no movement, no vision, no ambition. Understanding how to activate and regulate dopamine, especially in ways that are sustainable, gives you direct influence over your behavior, mindset, and even identity. What makes dopamine so powerful is not just its ability to make you feel good. It's the way it reshapes your perception of effort and reward. When you achieve something, large or small, and dopamine is released, the brain begins to associate that behavior with value. If you push through a challenge and you experience even a small dopamine reward afterward, the brain starts to encode that challenge as something worthwhile. Over time, this mechanism builds a pattern of resilience, reinforcing the idea that effort itself is rewarding. That is key, not just the outcome, but the effort becomes desirable. This is why it's critical to learn how to manage your own dopamine release. If you rely only on external rewards, likes on social media, sugar, caffeine, or the approval of others, you become dependent on things outside your control. The dopamine system becomes hijacked by quick fixes, and your baseline levels start to drop. The highs become short-lived and the lows get deeper. But when you learn to attach dopamine to internal milestones, especially the process of growth, everything changes. You gain control over your own motivation. One of the most effective ways to do this is to deliberately notice and appreciate small wins. The brain doesn't distinguish much between a large achievement and a small one when it comes to dopamine, as long as the experience is interpreted as meaningful. When you complete a task you've been avoiding, when you move your body even slightly during fatigue, when you hold your attention just a bit longer than usual during a difficult moment, these are moments that can generate a dopamine release if you acknowledge them. That self-recognition is not fluff. It is a neurochemical reinforcement of effort. Another powerful aspect of dopamine is how it interacts with novelty and challenge. The brain releases more dopamine when encountering something new, especially when that novelty is combined with the opportunity for growth. This is why taking on new challenges, even small ones, can be such an effective way to re-energize a stagnant mind. But this only works if the challenge feels slightly beyond your current capacity. Too easy and it's boring, too hard and it's demotivating. The sweet spot, the zone of proximal development, is where dopamine thrives. What's equally important is managing your baseline levels of dopamine. Dopamine works in peaks and troughs. Every time you experience a spike, whether from a workout, a goal achieved, or even just a positive interaction, your brain temporarily reduces your sensitivity to further dopamine. That's natural, but if you constantly chase spikes through scrolling, junk food, or overstimulation, your baseline drops over time. You start feeling unmotivated, numb, even depressed. The solution isn't more stimulation. It's spacing out your dopamine events, learning to enjoy effort without constant reward, and strategically layering high dopamine moments after hard work. For example, if you go through a difficult task, studying, working, training, and then immediately celebrate, reflect, or reward yourself, that timing creates a powerful reinforcement loop. The brain links the hard work to the reward, and the next time you face a similar challenge, dopamine starts to rise in anticipation of the reward even before it happens. That anticipation is what drives motivation. It's a loop you can build deliberately through repetition and timing. Dopamine also plays a major role in how we build identity. When you take action in alignment with a new version of yourself, say, someone who's disciplined, focused, or courageous, and you get a dopamine hit from that action, your brain starts to encode that as who you are. That's neuroplasticity in motion. You are reinforcing identity not through abstract affirmations, but through action and chemical feedback. Over time, repeated behavior plus internal reward leads to a shift in how you see yourself. And that shift is incredibly hard to break, because it's biologically embedded. This is also why stacking dopamine on top of healthy behaviors is so powerful. When you intentionally associate pleasure, pride, or progress with things like exercise, learning, or acts of service, those behaviors become self-sustaining. They start to feel good, not because someone told you they should, but because your brain has been trained to see them as valuable. You've built a system of self-directed motivation. Dopamine is not the goal. It's the guide, it's the signal that tells you where to go and what to pursue. When it's aligned with long-term values and goals, it becomes the engine of transformation. You don't need constant inspiration. You need strategic dopamine. When you learn to generate it from effort, from growth, and from meaning, you stop waiting to feel motivated and start becoming unstoppable. When you understand how your brain works, how breath can regulate your state, how visualization can rewire fear, and how dopamine can fuel sustainable motivation, you stop being a passive participant in your mental life. You gain access to real tools grounded in neuroscience that allow you to shift from reaction to intention. These aren't tricks or hacks. They are mechanisms built into your biology, waiting to be directed. And once you learn to use them, you realize that transformation isn't about waiting for change. It's about generating it from within.